Okay, for the first commander this week, we have Lathril, Blade of the Elves. An older commander, but still a very powerful commander, and honestly the only elf ball commander I would really want to play. Even with the release of High Perfect Morcant, I just really don't think that she's on the same level as Lathril. And in this deck tech, we're going to go over the 3 ways that this deck tries to win and how it goes about doing that.
Command priority. Make the plays. Be the problem.
So Lathril, Blade of the Elves is a 2 in Golgari for an Elf Noble with Menace, 2/3. Whenever she deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Then you can tap her and tap 10 untapped elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life and you gain 10 life. I've built this deck to be a power level 7 to an 8, or a 4 in the bracket system. Primarily Elf Ball and Overrun, and then ways to untap to take advantage of Lathril's tap ability, which is another way to win. And then combo. There's not a ton of combo in here, but there is a few ways that combo, and they are quite potent. Early game, this deck is not running as much artifact ramp and ramp spells as some of my others, just because we're on elves, and elves are the mana dork people. So not as much of a need, but we do have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Resilience, Golgari Signet, and Patchwork Banner for the color, but then mainly for the +1/+1 that it gives of the chosen creature type, which we'd obviously choose elves. And then just 3 ramp spells in case we don't hit very many of our dorks in Rampant Growth, Sky Shroud Claim, and Open the Way. So the obvious path here that a lot of people use, and that is also in this one, is to use Lathril's tap ability plus 10 other elves, and then I like to use an untapper to where we can get her ability done multiple times in a turn, which is really good at draining our opponents out, boosting our own life total, and just setting ourselves up if we can't finish it out with just that. Mana dorks, we have all the mana dorks for elves, starting with Elvish Mystic that taps for a green, Fyndhorn Elves that also taps for a green, Elves of Deep Shadow that taps for a black and deals a damage to you, Llanowar Elves which taps for a green, Elvis Harbinger, which when it enters you get to search your library for an elf and put that card on top, and she will also tap for a mana of any color. And then a few others in Heritage Druid, Canopy Tactician, and then not an elf, but Enduring Vitality, which will let all of our elves that don't tap for mana, tap for mana. Untappers, to go along with the Lathril plan, we've got Mobilize to untap all your creatures, Vitalize to untap all creatures you control, Seedborn Muse to be able to get triggers on other people's turn, because we're going to untap all of our permanents during each player's untap step, and Dionys Elvish Archdruid, which I run in multiple of my elf decks because it says elves you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it and put a 1/1 counter on it. This ability triggers only once each turn. So if you have Lathril, you tap Lathril and 10 elves, they're all going to tap for that ability. Dionys is going to untap all of them and give them all each a 1/1 counter. So it would then allow you to do it again, or just buff your whole team, hit everybody for 10, gain 10, and then go to combat. And then Staff of Domination, which is an untapper in itself, but then also the combo piece that we're going to be talking about later. The option 2 here is going to be a longer game that is just buffing our stuff over time with Elf Lords. And so you've got Leaf Crown Visionary, which other elves you control get +1/+1, and whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay 1 green if you do draw a card. Imperious Perfect, same thing. Other elves you control get +1/+1, and she can pay a green and tap it to put a 1/1 elf warrior creature token into play. Morcant's Loyalist, which is from the new set, obviously. I haven't done a complete overhaul of this deck with new cards from the new set, but this is one that I really wanted to put in here just because of the 1/1. Its other line of text here is whenever this creature dies, return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. And then, of course, Elvish Champion. Other elves have 1/1 and get Forest Walk, which just is a pseudo form of unblockable as long as your opponent controls a forest. Continuing on with Elf Lords, we have Galadrim Brigade from Lord of the Rings. It has squad 1 and a green, so as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may pay 1 and a green any number of times When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. And then other elves you control get +1/+1. So if you have a ton of mana dorks, which this deck does, then you could make a ton of mana, cast this, squat it up a whole bunch of times, and buff your entire team a whole bunch of times. Vanquisher's Banner is not an elf, but still gives the same buff of +1/+1 for the chosen type, and also a little bit of card draw, because whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, you draw a card. Tyvar Kell is the only planeswalker in the deck, just lets the elves tap for black, and then his +1 is to put a 1/1 counter on up to one target elf, untap it against Death Touch till end of turn. The 0 is create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. And then the next 6, if you can happen to get there, is you get an emblem with whenever you cast an elf spell, it gains haste until end of turn and you draw 2 cards. So good value there. And then Elvish Archdruid, other elves you control get +1/+1, and it taps to add a green for each elf you control. Cutscene. If you would, do me the favor of liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. It would really help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate it as a small YouTuber that's just trying to get going and making content for you all. It would help me out a lot, and again, I would appreciate it very much. Overruns, unblockable, and mass damage. We have Shaman of the Pack. If you can get a bunch of elves on the battlefield and maybe do Lathril's ability once or twice and then cast this, then target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control, you could possibly take somebody out of the game or finish the game if you were down to one opponent. Eladamri, Lord of Leaves, is in here for that pseudo kind of version of unblockable as long as your opponent controls a forest, because he gives all elves forest walk. And also your elves cannot be the target of spells or abilities, which is really nice in a deck that people love to kill your commander. Elvish Warmaster, 1 and a green. Whenever one or more elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. This ability only triggers once each turn, but more importantly, 5 and 2 green for elves you control get +2/+2 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. And Azuri, Renegade Leader, similar effects. The second effect, anyway, is 1 green is to regenerate another target elf, and then 2 and 3 green elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain Trample until end of turn. Then you have Skimfar Shadow Sage. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose one. You can have each opponent lose X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common, which in Elves we will have a ton. And then, or you can gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common. And then Tyvar the Bellicose. Whenever one or more elves you control attack, they gain Death Touch till end of turn, so a good way to be able to get in for damage, or unless they're going to lose whatever they block with. And then each creature you control has, whenever a mana ability of this creature resolves, put a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana this creature produced. This ability triggers only once each turn. So even with mana dorks, him on the battlefield is a good way to give them a little buff when you don't need him for anything else, maybe on the opponent before you use end step. Then of course, we have Craterhoof Behemoth, because that is one of the most iconic overruns in the game. For option 3, we have Combo. So we have some more mana dorks here. Priest of Titania, Wirewood Channeler, Circle of Dreams Druid, Elvish Archdruid, and Morrowind the Nurturer, all of which in one form or another tap for either the amount of elves that are on the battlefield, the amount of creatures you control, or their power, which Morrowind's the one with the power, and she gets a 1/1 counter every time an elf enters the battlefield under your control. So the more elves you have enter after Morrowind, the bigger she gets, but all of these can create a large chunk of mana. You combo that with Staff of Domination and its ability to untap target creature, then you can go infinite and gain infinite amount of life and tap all your opponent's stuff, and then swing in for that, draw your entire library. There's a ton of things. Also, if you already have a board to win the game and you're not really needing Staff of Domination to, say, draw your library, if you have something like Elvish Warmaster or Azuri Renegade Leader out, then you can simply make an infinite amount of mana, tap all your opponent's creatures, and then buff your team to 1,000,000 and 1,000,000 apiece and swing for lethal. Instance, we've got Beast Within to take care of a target permanent and give that opponent a 3/3 green beast creature token. Return to Nature to take care of either an artifact or an enchantment, or exile a card from someone's graveyard. Abrupt Decay can't be countered and destroys target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. Culling the Weak in case we need to sack something to make some mana to do something right now. And then Tamiyo Safekeeping. Target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until the turn you gain 2 life. Really just a protection spell for Lathril. Creating a big board all at once in Elven Ambush and Galadrim Ambush. Elven Ambush is create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. So it just doubles the size of your board. And then Galadrim Ambush is create X 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens where X is the number of attacking creatures. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-elf creatures. So good way to make a lot of elves and also protect your elves for that combat. Sorceries, we have some card draw and Sign in Blood to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Pact of the Serpent, choose a creature type, target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures that control the chosen type. You can use this on yourself, or if someone happens to also be playing Typhal, then you can maybe kill them by making them draw a bunch of cards and lose a bunch of life. Shamanic Revelation, just a good way to draw a card for each creature you control, and then once we've buffed our elves, it could gain us a lot of life because you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Elvish Promenade, you create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. And then a couple of tutors in Natural Order and Nature's Rhythm. Natural Order is 2 and 2 green to sack a green creature and go and get a green creature card and put it on the battlefield. And Nature's Rhythm is you get to search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And then it also has Harmonize X and 4 green. So you can then cast it again and use the creature or creatures that you have on board to then pay into X with it. Artifacts, we have Swiftfoot Boots and Skull Clamp that we haven't talked about yet. Swiftfoot is just some protection for Lathril. And then Skull Clamp is a good way before you buff your elves to help you get some card draw because a lot of the elves are 1/1s. So you're going to be equipping this for 1 and drawing 2 cards. This list could also have Lightning Greaves in it. I just don't have one in it at the time, but that's not a bad inclusion if you want to have a little bit more protection for Lathril. Enchantments, we have Guardian Project. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. So a good way to keep our hand full. Elderfang Venom gives all of our elves Death Touch when they're attacking. And whenever an elf we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Growing Rites of Itlamok is also in this deck, just as a Gaia's Cradle on the back, and then the front is when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in in any order. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 more creatures, which is really easy to do in this deck, you transform Growing Rites of Itlamok. In the backside, as I said, it is a Gaia's Cradle, so it taps for green for each creature you control, but it can also just tap for green if you happen to not have any creatures at that time. Then we have Prowess of the Fair. Whenever another non-token elf is put into your graveyard from play, you may put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token into play. So a little bit of a way to keep your board up if somebody board wipes. Then Elven Chorus, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library, and then creatures you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. So another way of making all of our creatures tap that don't already tap for mana. Land count and deck list. There's 15 forests, 6 swamps for a total of 32 lands. If you want to see the rest of the deck list that wasn't included here, you can find my link tree in my bio here on YouTube, or if you happen to be following me on Instagram or TikTok, my link tree is also there. It'll take you straight to my Mox field, and you will be able to see this deck list there, as well as any other deck tech that I have done. The list is also going to be live for you as well. If you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and head on over to the channel and check out some more of the deck techs there. I'm doing one at least a week, hoping to keep that pace up for the rest of the year, and just happy to be here and making deck techs for you all and trying to grow my channel. Till next time.
Command priority. Make the plays. Be the problem.